Okay, afternoon.
Hello.
Okay, so I'm going to take you through some of the Sainsbury's digital estate, joined by Mark. So just a little bit about me. My name's Michael Barber. I've worked at Sainsbury's for 10 years. I'm the Systems Development Manager for the property division. Some of my passions. So ultimately, I've got a 1977 VW camper van that I brought about 5 years ago and have spent the last 5 years getting it to a point where I'm very, very proud of it. It's one of my real achievements. Unfortunately, the challenge of having an old vehicle is it's been on the back of a lorry a few times. I'm also a really keen cyclist. So this was me when I did the Prudential Ride 100 in the last event.
Whoa, sorry about that. And there's a bit about me, and I think probably some of the things that were said by James Pellett this morning and talking to others, when we get together in these projects and we work together and we've got contractors and engineers and owners, we spend a lot of time putting the world to rights on our projects, but we have a lot of downtime as well, and you've got lunches and everything else, and you find that you have shared interests with other people, and I think you've all seen that today with cycling seems to have a bit of a repetitive edge. But yeah, when we noticed I've actually got a 1977 Spitfire, which I've had for more years than I care to remember, and I can remember actually my original interview with Mark Bew. If you don't know what PCSG are, it's Mark Bew's BIM consultancy. Most of my interview with Mark Bew was around Triumphs because Mark Bew's a Triumph enthusiast as well, so there's maybe something you don't know. And also, just I did the Brompton World Champs this year on the Mall, and it was the same day as Mike was doing the photograph, when he did his. So I think, shared interests and leads towards that trusted in being your client's trusted representative. And particularly when we've got this collaborative working going along, building those high-performance teams is all around trust and knowing your client.
Okay, and the other two characters I'd like to introduce is Sainsbury's Sid and Sainsbury's Sam. So one of the bits, and we'll talk about it a bit more as we go through, that we've tried to introduce is there's a massive piece around culture and training. So we've introduced a couple of characters into the mix. So we've got Sid is Sainsbury's Information Director, and he's all around kind of the information that you need to successfully deliver the project we're going to be discussing. And you've got Sam, which is Sainsbury's Asset Manager, and Sam's all around the physical assets and the components, and we use these throughout the journey to kind of explain what we're doing and really bring to life for the individuals why we're doing it and what's in it for them. So just a bit around Sainsbury's and a bit of the background. So ultimately we've got a massive consultancy base. Everything, or majority of stuff we do is all D&B contracts. And we've got an existing estate of about 1,600 Sainsbury's stores, and they're all in 2D. And we've also got everything we're doing going forward, and probably for about the last 3 years, is all in 3D. So we've got this challenge now where we've got 3D information and 2D information, and how do we really understand what we've got across our existing estate? And then looking at the different systems we've got, so we've got Buzzsaw, which we use internally for all our fit-out information. And we've had Buzzsaw for about 9 years, and we've slowly been building up our kind of fit-out and our store plans internally within Buzzsaw. We use BIW, or Conject, to hold all of our construction information. We've had BIW for probably since '97. So ultimately we've got a hell of a lot of historical information in our BIW system. We've got loads of stuff on network drives. We use a product called StoreSpace, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail later. But StoreSpace is a AutoCAD plugin that we use to create our 2D fit-out plans. And it delivers us a level of consistency across our plans. We've got OnePlace. So OnePlace is a Salesforce platform that holds our national database of stores. It holds all of our investment program. It holds what we believe our competitors are doing. So we can just track everything that we've got We use a system called Icon, or we brand it as our specs and standards system, and this holds all of our component type classification systems. And each individual component within our fit-out library is all on specs and standards. We've got a petrol filling station database, so we did an exercise as a pilot for what we're going to take you through about 2 years ago, where we kind of did a proof of concept on how can we make our 2D plans as intelligent as the principle of what we get from an IFC in a 3D world, so we can try and extract some data to start making informed decisions on how we invest our capital. We've got a system called Project Hive, so this is a main contractor tool that we use for our snagging. We use it to KPI our consultants, and we've got loads more. So we have a challenge, and this won't just be us, this will be consistent across and hopefully resonate across lots here, where our information is in lots of different places, and we faced into very quickly that you'll never get a solution that sits across all platforms. So how do you integrate? How do you create single source?
So time for me again. I just want to go back a bit more, and there's two consultants. There we go. Which I think, James is here today. James Cameron and James Brown. I keep forgetting James's surname. Really, they were involved back in 2000, really just after the government construction strategy started getting involved and working towards some BIM documentation that was based around the AEC UK standards. And really, it's around 3D models and it's around content creation. And a lot of work was done with that, and a lot of work was done with the architects as part of Sainsbury's framework in terms of developing that, and also with the Icon system that we mentioned before. And essentially that, for many years, I think since, I think it's 17 years, Sainsbury's have been using Icon to hold all the information about their standard specs and standards, room data, what is standard in a Sainsbury's store. And really in 2012-13, James and the team migrated an awful lot of Revit families and objects into that system, and they were attaching them to room data sheets and to object databases. So you can see there that on specs and standards now there is the information about the system, there's a 2D drawings, there's literature and a Revit object. And really that was then used to successfully create a number of fairly high density building information models, and they were being used for a variety of purposes. All the stuff that we know is good. Design coordination, although actually, if you think about it, building a big shed isn't that hard. Design coordination up in the ceiling, you can make things move around. But it's been used for an awful lot of design communication. There's a huge number of stakeholders, as Mike mentioned at the beginning, who get involved in putting a store together. So all of that good stuff was going on, but really the focus was around 3D, and that was building through. And then, of course, what's happened is the rise of the discounters came in and as a curveball and mucked it all up. So really at that point, Sainsbury's changed the way it was investing in stores. It stopped being a space race, building new stores against some of the other major competitors. It was around, right, okay, we really need to invest in our existing estate and make it a more, a better shopping experience. So really what then happened, and I think this sort of summarizes a lot of things. So I'll just stay on this for a second. We've got Sainsbury's really growing over a long period of time, but very, very slowly. And then in the sort of early 90s, early 2000s, you had the rise of the convenience stores. So suddenly the numbers of supermarkets, the numbers of convenience stores in that estate is massively growing. Therefore, the amount of data and information is then stretching and squeaking the existing systems. You've also got a bit of a rise. I mean, back in the old days, we used to manage, I'm old enough, and many people here, to manage cutting my fingers open on bits of tracing paper. We didn't lose drawings. They were all in these things. We had card indexes, we had microfiche, and we had all of the sort of systems to control that. But what happened is we had the rise of this thing, the personal computer, which basically meant people were starting to look after their own information. And that made then storing information really difficult. And now we've got this whole, I think the new BIM buzzword is Internet of Things. Suddenly now all of this is coming and we don't know where to put it. And that's all really has gone from the past of building a new Sainsbury's store, major refurbishment after 5 years, whatever, 10 years, and then a couple of little initiatives to put in a pizza counter. But now we're talking about initiatives hitting stores 10, 12 times a year. And really what that means is it's really hard to keep track of version control when you've got projects, sort of completing every 5 minutes. And really, it's really ended up in an information explosion that some of the existing systems that Mike's been through is struggling to keep them all in line. And really, that's what's then come on to this. I mean, BIM, we talk about plain language questions. It's those really, if you're doing a lot of interventions in stores, you need to be able to answer these really basic plain language questions quickly, so that people can make decisions. It's how many of these do we have? How many square feet have we got of this? And that was the ultimate goal of digital estate. We've realized that actually these 3 slides are sort of maybe a little bit early, but I'll go through them now anyway. As part of PCSG's involvement, one of the things we always do is document case studies of information that we're finding out. It helps with communication, helps with business cases. And this is the first one, and this is James, who's down. James, you wave? There he is. Conducted this audit last year, and it was basically took a whole load of convenience stores that had been modeled in Revit and did some proper audits, and mixed results, but that was interesting to sort of see, and ultimately, are the drawings that actually built this thing, did they come from the model, yes or no? And are the models, if you walked into site now, does the model match what's on the ground? And let's say mixed results. We also had another case study. Sainsbury's is one of the sort of biggest owners of PVs on top of their buildings, and all the information around this, the original installers went bust, and there was a lot of people in the Anstey Park, which is in Coventry, office that moved up from London, and loads of paper records were archived in the move, and it's really difficult to get all this information at the moment. It's not in one place. So it takes time, and then it's quicker and cheaper sometimes to do retrospective surveys. So there's quite a bit of that sort of thing going on, and certainly if you talk to other retail clients, it's a similar story. But then there's also some really good practice. There's a guy called Mark Hawker who came from Diageo, I think, originally, who's came along and went, I need to standardize some of this stuff 10, 15 years ago. I need to have standardized drawing numbers. So you see here, an R1 drawing is the refrigeration drawing for every single Sainsbury's store. Everybody knows what an R1 is. So we can take that best practice and then try and push it into some of the other disciplines. So I'll pass back.
Okay. So Mark's given you a bit of background. So about 2 years ago, we said, okay, that's where we are. What's the next steps? What do we need to do? So we pulled together our kind of high-level requirements, and really high-level to say, ultimately, we want to be able to digitise and effectively manage all data relating to building and assets, to understand what's in our existing estate, but also what's in our future. A bit around the background. So we looked at the way we invest our capital has changed. We no longer build loads and loads of new stores. The focus now is on our existing estate. How do we really maximise what we've got to ensure that we wisely invest our capital going forward? Market's got more challenging. Accuracy of our information is key. So we need credible data to make decisions. And the challenge I touched on right at the start, our information is spread across loads and loads of systems. So what we came up with ultimately what we want is data. We want it to be accurate, we want it to be intelligent, we need to protect and maintain it, we have to future-proof it. We broke that down into 4 areas. So we need to look at the right systems. So what systems hold our information, and what's the aspiration of all them systems? What are we going to do with them? What's the roadmap? How are we going to develop them? And the aim is to seamlessly link them all together so we can create single source. Define the data. So understand what have we got and who's going to protect and maintain it. And if we can't protect and maintain it, why are we holding it? Review the processes that underpin it to make sure that the credibility of that data is maintained and that we can trust it when we need it. And then the big bit that we always never spend enough time on is the training and culture. So we, and all businesses will look and say, okay, what's in it for the business and why should we invest the money? The bit we never spend enough time on is getting the individuals to really understand what's in it for them. Why should they adopt this? Why should they change the way they work? And how do we take people along that journey so they understand from a behavioural point of view what we're trying to achieve. So that was our kind of big aspiration, but that's a beast. So how do we break that down? So we broke our kind of digital estate journey into 3 sections, and we said, okay, as part of the first phase, let's look at the systems, the process, and the data, and let's deliver 3 things. The filing cabinet, so your kind of common data environment around where our drawings and documents are held. So we decided that actually Buzzsaw and BIW weren't fit for purpose going forward, and we need to amalgamate that and have a single filing cabinet. A database, so somewhere that can hold all of the information that's in our CAD plans. And one of the bits that I was quite passionate about when I started looking at this 2.5 years ago is the principle of what you can do in an IFC and how you can extract information out of an IFC. Why can't I do that in the 2D world? And we've already, for the last 10 years, our drawings are set up using object-based CAD, and we can pull all of that out using some existing tools we've already got, but they're all siloed on spreadsheets or individually in the drawing. And how can you suck all that information out and bring it to a central database to start answering some of them questions that Mark showed you? And then the last bit is a process manager. So how do you tie it together to then make sure that people are putting things in the right place, in the right time, so you can find them? So they were kind of our 3 big areas we wanted to focus on over the last 2 years and what we've been delivering. We went through a tender process and looked at lots and lots of different suppliers. We did a beauty parade and got 12 different companies in. We whittled it down to 3, and then they came in and did a second round of demos, and ultimately we decided to go with a CDE supplier called Business Collaborator, and we use Group BC, and I'll take you through some of the capabilities that we've been able to work alongside BC to deliver. But it wasn't just about the CDE and the system. So when I first joined this program about 3 years ago, I was very new to the BIM scene, and I saw it originally as it's a 3D model, it's building information modeling, and how can I make a 3D really intelligent? And one of the bits that I spent quite a lot of time doing was talking to different subject matter experts to say, actually, this is what I want to achieve, and I want it to be in line with industry standards, and how can you help us do that? So I had a conversation with Mark, which I'll never forget, because I rang him up saying, okay, Mark, we're knocking on the door of level 3 BIM, we're doing level 2, we're in a great place, we've got all these 3D models, and the models are really good. And to be fair, I had no clue who Mark was. I probably came across a bit arrogant, and I remember, and Mark was on the call at the time, Mark said, okay, we'll come in and have a chat with you. And I think the first day Mark come in, bless him, he ripped me to bits, where he's like, actually, Mike, from a 3D model point of view, you're in a good place. From a level 1 BIM, from an information side, you're not where we need to be. We've not got some of the foundation stuff in place around your hierarchy standards, and some of the bits we're going to go through in a bit more detail. So we decided to go with PCSG, and Mark's been supporting me as kind of on the strategic side. And as I joke quite often with Mark, he kind of throws in the grenades that just cause me headaches and cause me issues. We've got Rachel, who is our system information specialist, who has now been seconded into Sainsbury's to help me pretty much full time. We've got Adam, who is a BIM specialist, and we've got Penny, who's helping us on the culture and the behaviour side. Because one of the bits I was really keen on is it's not just about the system. And great, we're now going to build and develop all of these new standards. How the hell are we going to land that with our externals? Because we've got a massive external base. And it wouldn't be a BIM presentation without bringing this in. So this was one of the first things that I got introduced 3 years ago when the guys flew me. And they're like, look, Mike, you need to start right from the beginning, and we need to start building the standards, which is then where Mark came in.
So, yeah, again. So, yeah, it's been a bit of a sort of a discovery, a bit of a gap analysis, going back and just making sure that some of the level 1 fundamentals are in place. And often, I mean, that classic thing, I'm involved in obviously lots of other projects, and and you go through a whole PQQ process with a load of designers, and you sit down for that first meeting, and you go, right, so you're level 2 compliant, yeah. So you're going to use this naming convention? No, we're not going to do that. And you know, this very much is we have as Sainsbury's as framework architects, really good relationships, and we've got a good collaborative way of bringing this together. And certainly we've got a meeting next week, myself and James and some of the feasibility team, and we've involved the feasibility architects in this to make sure they're on that journey with us, not just delivering it as a fait accompli. So really, we started to look back. The first things we did was look at what is an asset, you know, in terms of at a facility level. So, to give you an example, if you look at the headquarters at Anstey Park in near Coventry, there's about 5 buildings on that site. And then there's link corridors between them, and then there is the car park, and there might be a smoking shelter there, or there might be a barbecue area. What is a facility? And having really quite fundamental discussions. And really, you might notice there's a bit of a sort of a Kobeism to that. And one of the things we've tried to do is turn the language into Sainsbury's own language, which helps the adoption, rather than just going, thou shalt use Kobe. Let's align it to it. And they don't need to know it's Kobe, but it sort of is. If you have a look at it, it's sort of there. And then the other thing we've done is got our illustrator involved again, and we've got Sid and Sam explaining this data structure to everybody so they can see how it's being used. And that's really, really important. When you're looking at a database and you type the word Tamworth into it, you could either get Tamworth as Sainsbury's in Tamworth, or you could get a Sainsbury's local, which is in Tamworth Road in Nottingham. It's all this sort of stuff. Classification. I often say about classification, trying to explain it, is you send little Johnny down to the corner shop and you want some Jif lemon, you could have a nasty surprise on Pancake Day. And really that's what you're trying to do with classification, is say one is a food product, one is a cleaning product. And there was an existing classification system in use via Icon, and one of the things we found out very quickly is nobody understood it. We just brought it to life. And we're now going through a process with a colleague of Mike's called Gail, is reviewing all this at the moment and seeing whether it's fit for purpose, and we're exploring whether we should be mapping it to some of the other classification systems you'd know, like Uniclass or NRM. We also looked at levels. Anybody from Edinburgh? Anybody know Edinburgh Waverley Station? Go on, be brave, put your hand up. Big load of steps, can't remember what they're called, come all the way from the top down to the bottom. Halfway down on the right-hand side, there's a little Sainsbury's local. What level is that on? I mean, no idea. Actually, does it matter? No, it doesn't really matter. But obviously, if it's a store on stilts, it does matter. So we've been through a piece of work to sort of standardise a lot of levels. And one of the things people don't understand is, again, it's all about having all of the different people involved in projects. People who are selling space don't like you calling it basement. It's a lower ground floor, because otherwise they can't shift it. So you've got to take that on board as well. So levels, standardization of levels, and then the classic 1192 naming convention. And one of the things we came across very quickly, and certainly at PCSG, we've done this with some of TFL, is in the standards, Mervyn hasn't really nailed the whole project and going to an asset in terms of asset numbering, and it's open. So we've come up with a way of making that work. The other thing we've obviously done is working with BC in terms of implementing the BS1192 workflows. Again, we've tried, I've worked closely with Mark. We've tried to sort of, implement it in a way that we know will work, but still conforms as much as possible to the standard. And, that's our interpretation of it, and we've been working with Group BC to do that. Lots of cultural changes, and I'll hand back to Mike for that one.
Okay. So once we got to the point where we'd defined the standards, and we knew what we wanted to do and what we needed to kind of put in place, we had this massive challenge where actually we've now got to start communicating this, and we've broken this down into lots and lots of phases. So we've dealt with fit out first, and we've got all our fit out teams, and we spent a lot of time looking at, okay, how do we get this across? How do we get people to understand why we're doing it and what's in it for them? So we decided to put this metaphor in place where we said, actually, we've delivered a garage, delivered a shed. And at the moment, we've taken the BC platform, and we've got an empty container. We've defined with PCSG the standards and the house rules. We've created some containers to where to store stuff. And ultimately, this is what we want. We want everything in a place where we can find it and it's well structured. This is what we don't want. And we spent a lot of time going around trying to explain to people that actually, if your garage is laid out like it is on your left, you can't find stuff unless you were the one that's put it away. If it's laid out on the right and actually it's structured using the industry standards that are already in place, just adopted or kind of tweaked to achieve our requirements, that actually we can find the stuff, and we'll show you what that looks like as we go through. So that was kind of the principle. I'm just going to take you through the journey we've been on, because this isn't just the implementation of our common data environment. There was a hell of a lot of work we need to put in place before we could start really interrogating our 2D estate and understanding. So the first system we looked at was store space. So I mentioned it right at the start. Store space, developed by CA Designs, a company in Great Yarmouth. And basically what store space does is a bolt onto AutoCAD, which we've been using for the last probably 10 years, and a lot of our major competitors use it as well. And it basically is used to create a fit-out plan, and it creates consistent object-based CAD. It puts polygons down which denote what spaces are used for. And then we did a big exercise where actually, because we've been using this software for the last 10 years, our fit-out plans and our estate of 1,600 stores weren't actually in a bad place, but we had to go through and validate them. So we did do a big exercise where we went through and validated all the information that we were going to be uploading into BC. So we did our PFS estate of 300 stores. We looked at our convenience.
Just say PFS means petrol filling station for those who are in retail.
Yeah, we looked at our convenience stores and we looked at our supermarket estate. And we got to a point, and it took us about 8 months to do this, where we went through and basically validated our drawings. And I'll show you the tool we used to validate it as we go through. So the next thing we looked at while we were going through, and all of this was done in parallel, is we did a big piece of work with Icon, who supply our specs and standard system. So we've got about 7,500 components in the fit-out world that sit on specs and standards. So we went through and did a lot of work with Chris and his team to review all of them specification items and make sure the information was good, the classification was set up in line with the work that we'd done with Mark. And this is the toolkit that Icon developed for us so we could go through and validate the drawings. So basically, there's a plan of one of our Sainsbury's convenience stores. Across the top, you've got a collection of Icon tools. So the first one is kind of the block library. So every component and every data sheet that's held in specs and standards has a corresponding 2D CAD block and 3D plan. And the framework and the principles of what I'm demonstrating in 2D work exactly the same in 3D. So you would click on your block library, you get your list of components, and you basically drag and drop. The second one is then add links. So basically by doing that, every block that's in a drawing, and this is what we did as part of the validation piece, within CAD or within Revit, depending on what platform you're in, it will look at the 2D name or the 3D family name and say, I'm a cabinet.dwg. So it goes off to specs and standards and says, tell me the classification and the individual datasheet number for table.dwg. So we don't pull and populate our models or our 2D drawings with lots of information. All we do is put a link to specs and standards that says it's a classification A10, which tells me it's a Bayer gondola, and it's datasheet number 0001, and then attached to that are 47 different parameters that could be manufacturer, make, model, etc., etc. And it creates a link. And then what we can do is we can use the other tools across the top to then say, okay, now you've gone and queried the Specs and Standards website, you've pulled down all the information and we want to validate. Give me an overview. And then we've got a set of parameters that say, well, actually, if it's a yellow piece of kit, it's current specification, and you don't need to worry. If it's a green piece of kit, it's an innovation. If it's pink, it's under review, or if it's red, it's obsolete and superseded. If it's not coloured at all, it doesn't exist in specs and standards. So when we did the data cleansing piece, the first thing we did was open our current drawing, run this tool, and that gave us really quickly an understanding of, well, what's current. And then all we'd do is, if it's not in specs and standards, we would either say, well, actually, that is a historical piece of kit that has been in our stores for the last 5-10 years, but because we haven't done it recently, it wasn't done through this process, add it into specs and standards as a superseded piece of kit. And we built the library up over 8 months, which then got us to that 7,500 blocks. And we're now in a place where I'd say 90%, probably 95% of the kit from a fit-out point of view is on there and classified. So that was specs and standards. We then looked at One Place. So One Place is our Salesforce CRM system. And we did an update to that back in November the 14th. And we introduced this concept of a location. So previously, we were always focused on our supermarkets and our convenience stores. And we then started looking at, well, actually, we do so much more. We do store sports centres, we do depots. We've got our PFS estate, and we are a massive property company as well. And with the acquisition of Argos, we've now got an Argos of estate of over 800 stores we need to deal with. So we, as part of the Back to Basics, we reviewed what have we got in there for supermarkets, what have we got in there for convenience, what have we got in there for petrol. And we added petrol in new. We brought in all of our store support centres. We brought in all of our depots, and we brought in our Argos estate. So we're now in a place from a national database of stores. We have a data sheet on everything from a trading point of view that we own. We've still got a non-trading estate we need to deal with, but from a trading point of view, we're in a really good place. And then that kind of, so all of them were the building blocks and the jigsaw pieces that this common data environment that we delivered through BC, we now want to link it all together. So we want to take all of the framework we've done and connect the pieces. So 7th of November, we launched the first phase of our instance of Business Collaborator. We then imported from that data cleanse we did all of the drawings for supermarkets, convenience and petrol, which equated to nearly 1,700 drawings. And we'll talk about this in a bit more detail as we come on, but we've linked through BC's and Icon's API the ability to then go off to specs and standards and pull all of that information from specs. And now we can start doing some really clever reporting to start answering the questions around, well, what have we got? How many have we got from a fit-out point of view? So this kind of just explains the process. So ultimately, you've got your CAD drawing, you've got the store spaces creating the rooms and spaces, you've got specs and standards that's holding all of our kind of classification and individual object levels. So we've each got an individual data sheet with 47 different types of metadata in. You've got the validation toolkit that I took you through that Chris and his team has developed. And you've got the naming convention that Mark and his team at PCSG supported. And all of that gives us a really robust drawing. We upload it into BC, so this is our kind of CDE. We upload it in a DXF format, and the principle for IFC is going to be exactly the same. The system extracts it, so it can take an hour, 24 hours, depending on how big the file is, to gather information. And then we can start doing some really clever stuff on it and start reporting on the information in the database. But we had some challenges.
Yeah, so one of the things that happened, I mean, we generous, our BIM consultants will sit there and say, right, well, hang on, how are you going to validate and verify? One of the things we started finding was that the CAD teams have been doing workarounds for years, not just a few, but years and years and years. And what it comes down to is, if you look on the left-hand side, there was no polygon. So the polygon defined in store space would be a polyline. Let's get techie. I mean, got all sorts of people here. And the RGB value for that polyline plus its layer can be mapped against a certain room type. You know, that's essentially the code. And there was none for an accessible WC. So what did they do? They put in two, one for male and one for female, so they could drive it out. Well, of course, that suddenly means it was reporting wrong, and then any objects that were sitting across those polygons were not in one polygon or the other. So we had to go back around the loop and create a new line type, which takes time, and then push that back out and get the drawings done. The other thing we found is, get a bit geeky here, is anybody collect 2Ps at home and get really bored of counting them? Well, there's these clever machines that you can go and lob it in the top, and I don't know, it takes 10% and gives you some notes at the bottom. Well, it was classified wrong in the system. So it was classified as one of these for doing caching up, not as a piece on the sales floor. So suddenly the reporting was wrong. So we're now having to do a piece where we've had to go back and look at that 2,700 objects and make sure they're classified and make sure they're correct. Because obviously the more that you're relying on the data, particularly when you start looking at some of the machine learning we looked at earlier on in here, you need this stuff to be right. So that's that one. The other one we had was around objects which have huge bounding boxes. So this is all about something called, it's a really cool name, an insectocutor, which like deals with flies. But of course it has a radius. And that was then, going into multiple rooms, and that was causing problems in terms of identifying where it was. So we've been through a bit of a journey over the last few months of trying to clean up these oddballs and then creating them as a bit of a standard. Now, obviously, the next thing is to move forward into doing the same thing with IFCs, but that quality issue is still there. If rubbish in, rubbish out, and we need to check the quality of the drawings, and we need to make sure they're right, and that's really, really, really important. So how do we do that? We come back to the old 1192 workflows, and that's really important. Making somebody accountable for checking something before they give it to you, and making somebody in Sainsbury's accountable for checking it and accepting it when we go from PIM to AIM, when we move it from a project world into the asset information world. Particularly when something like a store plan at the moment, you might have 10 new versions in a year, plus all of the individual projects going. So it's a really big challenge. And ultimately, where are we now? We end up with a situation where some of those plain language questions of how many of these do we have, how many square foot have we got of this, and which stores have got one of these, we can now answer in a matter of seconds. And more importantly, self-service. So in individuals in the past within Sainsbury's property, the whole that we all get this, can you just tell me? And you sit there, okay, I'll send you that. Now people can self-service, which means that people can get on with the interesting stuff. So we've got a video that I think we want to run. I don't know if there's anything you want to say before that.
No, let's go through. So click on the next one.
So this will show you pretty much exactly what we've been up to. So this is the One Property Business Collaborator front end, searching for a store. And then it enables somebody to go straight to the store plan, click on it, and then you can see the current drawing, DWG, PDF, and there it is. So this is inspecting the database for a particular store. So there's a full integration with the Salesforce platform. So if there's a new store that launches, it automatically creates everything in one property. And the various Group BC have worked with the Salesforce developer with APIs backwards and forwards to make that happen.
So one of the really good bits here is by calling the drawing number, the right PAS 1192 name, it's auto-tagged all of the metadata for you, so you don't have to manually go through and update it. It's a massive benefit for us.
And it's a good sell to the consultants because it means if they do name it properly, it's so much easier. They literally just bung it in and it files itself.
And then we've got all the workflows for approvers and all the framework in place to make sure that you're sending it to the right person at the right time. So this is us now expecting an individual Tamworth store and understanding has it got a pizza counter, and this store had a slimline. But now I want to know how many slimline pizza counters I've got across the whole estate. Or in this case, I'm going to go supermarket estate, but actually let's look in a central zone. So you can split it using that hierarchy that Mark talked you through. You can go down to an individual level. Now we can find an individual component type. So in this case, we're searching by pizza counter, and then it pulls up and tells us everywhere there's a slimline pizza counter across our central estate. Clicker.
So just to acknowledge that this is a collaborative effort. I think it'd be quite difficult to find a single solution that would deliver all this. So we've got obviously Sainsbury's Property and Group BC, ourselves and Icon, and there's also been CA Designs involved. And certainly there's been contributions from quite a few of the design agencies who've cleaned all this up. So we've got about 5 minutes left before I think it's sort of coffee time or the next swap over. So I'll leave sort of Sid and Sam to say bye. And if there's any questions, we will be around for today and tomorrow if you want to come and see us. I'm sure Sanj, do you want to wave from Group BC down there? I'm sure if there's any questions. And where's Chris from Icon? He's there. Let's stick it together. Collaborative working, you see. Okay, that's us. Any questions?